On the 10th of February 2022, the authorities announced they finally solved the 1964 cold case rape and murder of 9-year-old girl, Marise Chiverella. The events unfolded at around 8 a.m. on the 18th of March 1964, when Marise left her home at 533 Alta Street in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. She walked alone to St. Joseph's School, which was only a few blocks away in North Laurel Street, or roughly half a mile. She would usually walk there with her 2 older brothers and older sister, but that morning she decided to leave 5 minutes earlier. She was carrying canned food to donate to a feast day food drive at the school. According to the authorities, she was last seen walking near 6th Street and Church Street at around 8:10 a.m. within an area that's usually built up with traffic. Later that day, at around 1 p.m, Marise's beaten and lifeless body was found in a hole at a waste coal pit. It was roughly about 2.5 miles from her home, just north of State Route 309, adjacent to the Hazleton Airport. She was clothed, but her shoes had been removed and all her possessions were strewn about nearby. Her hands and feet were bound together with shoelaces, and she had a multicoloured scarf shoved into her mouth. The authorities arrived and collected evidence at the scene, including foreign bodily fluid recovered from her body and on her jacket, and people were questioned. An autopsy determined that she had been bashed in the head, raped and then strangled to death. One local man wanted for questioning ended up taking his life by carbon monoxide poisoning just before he was due to sit a lie detector test. Over 200 investigators and troopers were assigned the case from the beginning, but despite an extensive investigation at the time, leads dried up and the case went cold. In 2007, investigators re-examined the case. They entered the DNA collected from the crime scene into the CODIS DNA database. A suspect's DNA profile was developed, however no matches were found. In late 2018, detectives partnered with DNA specialist company Parabon. In March of 2019, advances in technology allowed them to develop a snapshot phenotype picture of the suspect using his DNA. It helped predict the suspect's physical traits and ancestry, with age-progressive images of what he may look like at ages 25, 40 and 60. The suspect was said to be a man with fair complexion, a wide nose, dark hair, and green or hazel-coloured eyes. In March of 2019, the image was released to the public in hopes of finding the suspect, but no one had been identified. In 2020, Parabon submitted the DNA into a genealogy database, whereas compared to other DNA in the system, and a very distant 6th cousin of the suspect was found. Towards the end of 2021, they managed to track down closer relatives of the suspect, whom were interviewed and provided voluntary DNA samples. They then narrowed their search down to James Paul Fort, who was born on the 21st of July 1941, but passed away from natural causes at the age of 38 in 1980. The authorities exhumed James's body in January of 2022. His DNA was collected and found to be an exact match to the DNA on Marise's body and on her jacket. On the 10th of February 2022, the authorities declared James Ford as Marise's killer, who would have been 22 at the time of the offence. James wasn't on the investigators' radar at the time of Marise's murder. The authorities said that James was later arrested by state police in 1974 for a violent lewd assault of a woman, which he pleaded guilty to and was sentenced to 1 year probation. He had another run-in with the law in 1978 for reckless endangerment and harassment. It was discovered that James lived only 6 blocks away from Marise's home at the time of the murder. He had no connection with Marise's family. James worked as a bartender at a convention hall on State Route 309 in Hazleton for several years, where he collapsed and died from heart failure on the 16th of May 1980.